What if I told you the next King of England isn't a surprise, but what is shocking is how fast it's all happening? It was just after sunrise when the first whispers rippled through the royal corridors of Buckingham Palace, low murmurs that spread like wildfire. Something monumental was about to happen. The palace gates, usually quiet in the early morning hours, stirred with subtle tension. The guards stood taller. The palace aides moved faster. And soon, before the world even had its second cup of tea, the United Kingdom would be hit with news it hadn't expected to hear so soon. King Charles was stepping down. And not just stepping back temporarily, but relinquishing the crown entirely. Before we continue, please hit the like button, subscribe to the channel, and turn on the notification bell for updates. The throne, the very symbol of the British monarchy's unbroken line stretching back more than 1,000 years, had a new heir, not in waiting, but in reality. Prince William, the Duke of Cambridge, would now become king. The country held its breath. News vans crowded outside the gates. Reporters whispered urgently into their microphones. Helicopters swirled in the gray London sky. The world's most famous family, once again, was making history, but this time, it wasn't through tragedy or scandal. It was through a quiet, deliberate act of transfer. And with it, a tidal wave of questions, hope, apprehension, and awe. What would King William look like? Would he modernize the monarchy for a new generation? Was this really Charles's decision, or was it made under pressure? And most importantly, what does this mean for the future of the monarchy? As soon as the official press release came through from Clarence House, phones began ringing from Balmoral to Sydney. Social media platforms, already humming with speculation, went into overdrive. But amidst the frenzy, one thing was clear. We had entered a new royal era, and Prince William, now King William, was not only ready, but excited to lead. The announcement was simple, yet seismic. A carefully worded statement, stamped with royal insignia and full of graceful language, confirmed what many had already suspected in recent months, due to what was described as the natural rhythms of age and duty. King Charles would be passing the crown to his eldest son. And the coronation date? Already set. But behind that polished language lay an emotional and historical bombshell. After just a few years on the throne, Charles had decided to step aside. And it wasn't a scandal or illness that forced his hand. It was something deeper, something more personal. Insiders say it was a decision made not from weakness, but from a long-held desire to see his son take the reins while he still had time to witness it all unfold. For many royal watchers, this marks the most unexpected and emotionally charged moment in British monarchy since the death of Princess Diana. Because unlike transitions of the past, which have mostly occurred through death or emergency, this one is marked by choice. Deliberate, intentional, powerful. It's not every day that a king chooses to hand over his crown while still breathing. And yet, that is exactly what has happened. While some in the UK were just waking up to the news, others were already outside the gates of Buckingham Palace with flowers, flags, and hand-drawn signs that simply read, "Welcome, King William." But this was no ordinary succession. It wasn't a baton passed in haste. It was a handover choreographed with dignity, anticipation, and royal precision. Sources say the decision had been in motion for months, and perhaps even longer. Those who were closest to the palace say King Charles had been preparing William behind closed doors, giving him guidance, notes, even mentorship on navigating the stormy waters of a divided modern monarchy. But the moment the statement went public, the pressure on William surged. He was no longer just the future of the crown, he was its present. And for a man who has lived nearly every chapter of his life under the glare of global attention, this was the chapter he could never fully prepare for. Still, as the cameras turned toward him during his first brief appearance following the announcement, William didn't flinch. His smile was soft, sincere. His eyes, according to body language experts, were brimming with a mixture of humility and pride. For someone stepping into the most scrutinized role on earth, he looked almost liberated. Gone was the tension that sometimes clung to his shoulders in recent years. Instead, William looked calm, poised, ready. This was not just a man accepting a role. This was a man embracing destiny. In truth, Prince William's rise to the throne has always been less about if and more about when. But the timing of King Charles's decision is what no one could have predicted. After all, Charles waited nearly his entire life to wear the crown, longer than any heir in British history. His reign, though just beginning, seemed destined to stretch on for at least a decade, especially given his father Prince Philip's longevity and the robust schedule Charles maintained even into his 70s. And yet, Even the most seasoned royal analysts were caught off guard. Because this wasn't just the emergence of a new monarch. This was the unfolding of a historic royal pivot, a reshaping of the monarchy's image, a gamble on youth and modernity over tradition and legacy. And William? He's the embodiment of that gamble. Educated, calm under pressure, emotionally intelligent, and deeply aware of the burden of his lineage, William has always walked the line between modern man and royal figure. He married for love, raised his children in the quiet countryside, and occasionally spoke openly about mental health, parenting, and the pressures of his role. In short, he's relatable in a way his predecessors never were. And that relatability is precisely what Buckingham Palace now seems to be banking on. Because for all of Charles's efforts to reform and refine the royal institution, it has remained a monarchy tethered to the past. With William, it now has a shot at the future. And yet, the crown is a double-edged sword. For every celebration and royal parade, there will be endless scrutiny. Every word he speaks will be analyzed. Every move measured. Every silence interpreted. Can William handle it? Is Britain ready to accept him not just as a prince, but as a king? And will the royal family, still fractured by recent scandals, rally behind him or begin to splinter even more? Even as these questions hang in the air, one thing is certain: the date is set, the crown is ready, and the next chapter of British history has begun. Prince William, no longer the boy who walked behind his mother's coffin, no longer just the doting father or dutiful duke, is about to become something more. Something historic. Something eternal. The King of England. As Prince William stood before the cameras later that day, the world's eyes fixated on him, not just as a prince, but as the man who would become king. There was something in his expression that spoke volumes without him needing to say a word. A silent acceptance of what was coming. A readiness forged from years of quiet preparation and quiet suffering. For William, this wasn't just about the throne. It was about the memory of his mother, the late Princess Diana, whose presence was palpable in that moment. Every step he takes in public life echoes with her legacy. Every hand he shakes, every child he bends down to speak with, every vulnerable soul he advocates for, those are threads of Diana woven into his character. And now, he would carry her name into history in a way no one could have ever predicted when she tragically passed in 1997. It's not just the British crown William will wear. He will wear the hopes of millions who once looked to his mother as a symbol of compassion, vulnerability, and grace in a world that often lacked all three. That weight was never lost on him. Insiders close to William say he has long struggled with the idea of duty versus identity. For much of his adult life, he attempted to live a somewhat ordinary life under extraordinary circumstances. University years in St. Andrews, helicopter pilot training, and then his time in the air ambulance service weren't just escapades or royal PR. They were efforts to connect to the public as a human being before he was coronated as a symbol. But time doesn't pause for princes. And as King Charles slowly began stepping back from royal duties over the past few months, the signs were becoming more obvious. William's role had increased. His presence at state events became more commanding. Even his speeches grew more assertive. Behind closed doors, preparations were already underway. The crown was being handed over. Not physically yet, but emotionally, strategically, and spiritually. That coronation date? It wasn't picked on a whim. Every single detail was orchestrated with royal precision. From the season it will take place, designed to mirror moments of great royal transition in the past, to the venue, which holds echoes of both Queen Elizabeth II's 1953 crowning and Prince William's own wedding to Catherine in 2011. The symbolism is unmistakable. This isn't just a ceremony. It's a story, a narrative the monarchy is telling about continuity, rebirth, and resilience. Public opinion polls began surfacing within hours of the announcement. Over 70% of respondents favored William stepping up early. The numbers painted a clear picture. While Charles was respected, William was beloved. The public had long seen him as the bridge between tradition and change, monarchy and modernity. And now, that bridge is becoming the road forward. In classrooms across the UK, teachers explained the historical significance to curious students. In pubs, debates sparked over what kind of king William would be. Would he keep the Commonwealth intact? Would he trim the monarchy further, as Charles attempted? Would he extend a hand to his estranged brother Harry, or double down on silence? And above all, would the nation feel more united under his leadership? For a country that has faced its fair share of division, Brexit, economic strain, generational rifts, the hope for unity under a young, forward-thinking monarch is not just wishful thinking. It's vital. That's perhaps why, in this moment, the announcement of William's coronation feels bigger than a royal event. It feels like a national turning point, a reset, a rare chance to rekindle that unique bond between people and palace that has, for many years, felt frayed and transactional. But William has a challenge unlike any king before him. He must modernize without erasing tradition, lead without overshadowing, reign without seeming distant. In a digital world where public opinion can shift with a single tweet, maintaining the mystique of monarchy while being transparent and relatable is an almost impossible balance. And yet, he might just be the one to do it. Because William is not a monarch born out of luxury or aloofness. He is one forged by tragedy, service, and a deliberate desire to be seen as human first. When the cameras zoomed in that morning and he looked into the lens with calm eyes, it was more than a formal gesture. It was a statement. I am ready, not just to sit on a throne, but to walk beside a nation through what comes next. As the coronation date approaches, preparations will intensify. Royal tailors will begin stitching the ceremonial robes. The golden coach will be examined for wear. Every protocol rehearsed. Every camera angle studied. But the most important preparation is not in fabric or jewels. It is in William's mind and spirit. He must rise from prince to king not with arrogance, but with authenticity. And by the look in his eyes, the subtle quiver in his voice, and the gravitas with which he accepted this new path, the nation may have already received its first answer. Yes, he's ready. The United Kingdom now stands at the edge of a generational shift in its monarchy, and the world is watching. Not just for the spectacle, not for the headlines, but for the story that unfolds when a man molded by loss, compassion, and duty steps forward and accepts a crown. And so begins a new reign. As the first wave of celebration settled into thoughtful reflection, it became clear that this wasn't just about the ceremonial grandeur or the centuries-old traditions that would soon unfold. This moment was about legacy, both the one that William inherits and the one he will eventually leave behind. And legacies, especially royal ones, aren't written with ink on parchment. They're written with choices, appearances, silences, and sometimes with rebellion against the very institution they're sworn to protect. William's journey to the throne has been anything but ordinary. Born into global fame, his earliest memories weren't of schoolyards or quiet holidays. They were of flashing cameras, tabloid headlines, and the ever-present weight of expectation. Every time he smiled in public, every time he looked solemn at a royal function, every time he took his mother's hand or bowed his head in grief after her tragic death, it was captured, analyzed, framed as either princely or performative. So, when the announcement came that he would soon be crowned king, the world didn't just see a man inheriting a title. They saw the boy who lost his mother, the young man who tried to be normal, and the father now trying to build something better for the next generation. That emotional narrative, his transformation from heir to monarch, is what sets William apart from the kings of the past. He didn't inherit a throne in peaceful times. He inherited a monarchy still recovering from public scandals, familial rifts, and an evolving society that questions the very need for a royal institution. And yet, despite all this, William has managed to maintain the public's respect, and more importantly, their curiosity. Because he's not flashy. He doesn't chase attention. He doesn't perform. And in a world where public figures often live and die by their ability to captivate the internet, William's quiet dignity has become, ironically, his most powerful weapon. Palace aides say he spent the last 6 months in intense meetings with advisors, constitutional scholars, global ambassadors, and even religious leaders. He wanted to understand, not just the role he was about to take on, but the meaning of that role in today's context. And while Charles was known for championing environmental causes and engaging with matters of architecture and faith, William's focus is sharper. He's passionate about mental health, about ending homelessness, about climate change, but also about modernizing how the monarchy is seen, particularly by younger generations who see the institution as outdated or elitist. To William, the crown isn't a relic, it's a responsibility. And part of that responsibility is knowing when to listen more than speak. As preparations continue behind the scenes, sources close to the palace say William has insisted on having more direct conversations with common citizens in the weeks leading to the coronation. Not staged PR events, not red carpet galas, but real visits to hospitals, shelters, schools, and communities that have long felt ignored by royal fanfare. He wants to hear their concerns, understand their needs, and somehow bring that understanding into the institution he's about to lead. It's not a strategy. It's a belief. that a king who does not understand his people cannot serve them. And in that belief lies a quiet revolution. Because for centuries, the British monarchy thrived on distance, on mystique, on being just out of reach. A shimmering symbol of power so elevated that it never needed to explain itself. But that model is crumbling. Today's monarch cannot afford to be merely symbolic. They must also be seen, heard, trusted. And that's where William's story becomes more than a royal tale. It becomes a national opportunity. In interviews given by former palace staffers and long-serving courtiers, a recurring theme emerges. William is the first monarch in waiting who actively challenged royal protocol not for rebellion's sake, but to make it better. He often asks why, instead of accepting because it's always been done this way. He brings notes to meetings. He fact-checks public speeches. He demands transparency in the way royal charities are run. And while some in the royal circle find this exhausting, others call it refreshing. Because for the monarchy to survive in this digital, skeptical, fast-moving world, it must evolve. And William might be the evolutionary spark it's needed. Already, subtle changes are being discussed. Fewer lavish processions. More sustainable coronation practices. A tighter, more functional royal family roster focused on service rather than status. More direct public engagement. A media strategy that reflects not just regal image management but honest storytelling. One palace aide even hinted at something unprecedented. William may consider granting regular interviews after he's crowned. Not soft, scripted interviews, but real conversations about his values, priorities, and vision for the monarchy. That alone could reshape how monarchs interact with the world. Because while Queen Elizabeth II's era was one of stoic silence and quiet strength, and Charles's reign began with cautious modernization, William's tenure may usher in something new entirely, a monarchy that's not just visible, but vulnerable, human. And in that humanity lies the key to its survival. By the time the sun set on the day the news broke, royal photographers had captured thousands of images of William, some formal, some candid. But there was one that stood out, a single shot of William, standing slightly apart from his aides, hands clasped, eyes lifted, no expression forced. Just a man alone in thought. It wasn't a portrait of power. It was a portrait of preparation. Because becoming king isn't about the crown, it's about the crown's weight. And William, through loss, resilience, fatherhood, and unwavering patience, seems ready to carry it. With the coronation on the horizon, the world prepares for ceremony, celebration, and spectacle. But for William, the journey is quieter. He's not just becoming king of a country. He's becoming the voice of its future. The handover of a crown is not like the passing of a baton in a relay race. It is not swift, nor is it visible to the untrained eye. Instead, it is a slow, calculated process, layered with symbolism, tradition, and an abundance of behind-the-scenes maneuvering. In the case of King Charles handing the throne to Prince William, the process has been nothing short of historic, not just because of its significance, but because of its rarity in the modern age. To understand the magnitude of what has just occurred, one must first grasp how uncommon it is for a monarch to voluntarily step down. Abdications and resignations are incredibly rare within the British monarchy. The last major abdication happened in 1936, when Edward VIII relinquished the throne to Mary Wallace Simpson, an American divorcee, plunging the monarchy into chaos and redefining the line of succession. That abdication came with scandal, shame, and constitutional crisis. This, however, is different. There is no scandal, no forced exile, no political uproar. This is a king who has simply decided that it is time to let the next generation take over. And the decision was not made overnight. According to royal aides who spoke under strict anonymity, the first serious discussions about transitioning the monarchy began more than a year ago, shortly after Charles's coronation. It wasn't that he felt incapable of fulfilling his duties. It was that he questioned the long-term strength and relevance of the monarchy in the rapidly changing world. He saw the decline in royal support among younger citizens. He observed the rise of anti-monarchist sentiment on social media. And he began to wonder whether he, in his 70s, was truly the right person to steer the institution into the future. Charles reportedly consulted with advisors, clergy, and family members. Those close to the matter say the turning point came during a private retreat in Balmoral, where Charles is said to have had an emotional conversation with both William and Camilla. During this meeting, he laid out his fears, his hopes, and his belief that William's time had come. William, stunned at first, reportedly asked his father whether he was absolutely certain about the decision. Charles was. He told William that being a monarch was about timing, not just duty. And while Queen Elizabeth had reigned for over 70 years, the world in which she reigned no longer existed. In the age of globalization, climate crisis, digital warfare, and institutional skepticism, it would take someone with youth, stamina, and deep public trust to keep the monarchy relevant. It would take William. After months of careful planning, the official announcement was scheduled. A press statement, the kind that has become familiar with palace communications, polished, deliberate, and almost poetic, was prepared. It avoided dramatic language. There were no mentions of stepping down, abdicating, or retreating. Instead, it spoke of transition, of legacy, of honoring the future by empowering it. But internally, the palace machinery went into overdrive. Departments were reshuffled. Royal roles were revised. Invitations for the coronation were printed behind closed doors. And William, now thrust into the role of Shadow King, began preparing in silence. The only outward signs were subtle. Increased attendance at diplomatic events, more engagements involving international figures, and a more confident public speaking style. It was as though he had been rehearsing without the audience knowing it was a rehearsal. Then came the moment. The day Charles announced that he would be stepping back and that Prince William would be crowned king on a forthcoming date. The air shifted, not just within the palace, but across the country. Parliament received briefings. The press descended on every available royal commentator. Commonwealth leaders were given advance notice. But even with all the planning, the public was stunned. Because even when you expect change, it still lands like a thunderclap when it finally arrives. So what do we know about how the royal handover unfolded? First, it was constitutional, but not legislative. Technically, the monarchy does not require an act of parliament for a voluntary abdication if the reigning monarch is still alive and of sound mind. However, it does require notification to the Privy Council and affirmation from senior royal figures and government leaders, including the Prime Minister. According to leaked documents from a palace insider, Charles signed the Declaration of Transition during a quiet ceremony in Clarence House, attended by Camilla, William, and select members of the Privy Council. The act was symbolic, sealed with a royal signet ring, and followed by a private prayer led by the Archbishop of Canterbury. Second, the coronation date was not chosen randomly. It coincides with the feast of St. Edward the Confessor, a monarch widely regarded in royal tradition as the spiritual predecessor of the English crown. Holding William's coronation on this date ties him not just to lineage, but to legend, a deliberate move to reinforce continuity and sanctity in the transition. Third, there was intense discussion around what role Charles would play moving forward. The decision was made to refer to him as King Emeritus, a title borrowed from papal tradition rather than former king, which carried a sense of finality. This allows Charles to retain certain ceremonial roles without interfering with William's leadership. Interestingly, it's been revealed that Camilla was instrumental in shaping this soft landing for Charles. She advocated behind the scenes for dignity, subtlety, and a sense of grace to surround his exit. Her influence has long been understated, but in this instance, it proved critical in avoiding any perception of a forced departure. Then there's William. Sources say his first act as king-in-waiting was not to schedule state visits or engage in global diplomacy, but to sit privately with his family. Not just his wife and children, but his staff, his advisors, and even his critics. He wanted feedback. Honest, unfiltered advice about what kind of king the people wanted him to be. This act alone signaled a different style of monarchy, one rooted not in edicts or lineage, but in listening. So far, what we know is this. The handover was a product of personal conviction, national necessity, and historical weight. It was not reactive. It was proactive. The United Kingdom, whether ready or not, has entered a period of transformation. And at its helm is a man raised not only in the shadow of power, but also in the glare of public tragedy. William's ascent is not a fairy tale. It is not the rise of a reluctant boy king. It is the arrival of a leader molded by loss, steadied by love, and sharpened by decades of silent observation. He has watched every generation of royal leadership make its mark. His grandmother's resolve, his father's introspection, his brother's departure. And now, finally, it is his turn. It was a moment that felt both inevitable and astonishing. Prince William, no longer the heir in waiting but the monarch to be, stepped into the public eye just hours after the official statement from Buckingham Palace was released. The atmosphere outside Kensington Palace was electric. Journalists jostled for position, photographers adjusted their lenses with precision, and royal watchers held their breath. Everyone wanted to see not just what William would say, but how he would carry himself. The world wasn't waiting for words. It was waiting for truth written in body language, tone, and presence. And then, there he was, emerging from the grand entrance of the residence, dressed in a sharply tailored navy suit. Prince William's appearance was elegant, polished, and yet unmistakably human. He paused at the top of the steps. His hand adjusted his jacket, an unconscious movement, perhaps. His gaze swept the crowd, not nervously, but with deliberate calm. In that instant, the transformation from royal son to sovereign figurehead was not just a matter of title. It was visible, palpable, and deeply emotional. Cameras clicked furiously, but amidst the flurry, one frame would dominate headlines across the world. It captured William looking straight into the camera, his expression poised yet introspective, his lips pressed in a subtle line, his brow slightly furrowed, not in distress, but in contemplation. It was the look of a man who understood the weight of the moment. And in that gaze, people saw more than just a future king. They saw the culmination of a lifetime of preparation, loss, resilience, and quiet dedication. They saw the boy who once walked behind his mother's coffin, now preparing to walk ahead of a nation. What made the moment even more poignant was its simplicity. There was no over-the-top speech, no grand theatrics. William didn't stride to a podium or wave from a golden balcony. He stood on stone steps, grounded and real. And when he did speak, his voice was clear, strong, and carefully measured. "I stand here today with deep humility and profound respect," he began, looking directly into the camera lens. "My father, His Majesty King Charles, has led with honor and conviction. I am grateful for his service, and even more grateful for his trust." The crowd was silent. It wasn't just what he said, it was how he said it. The cadence of his words was deliberate, the tone sincere, with no hint of rehearsed pageantry. Royal observers and communication analysts alike would later praise his composure. His delivery struck a delicate balance, honoring his father, acknowledging the gravity of his new role, and reassuring a nation that this transition would be handled with steadiness and care. But behind that composure, there were glimpses of something deeper. A brief crack in his voice as he spoke of serving all communities across the United Kingdom with fairness and compassion. A fleeting hesitation before saying the word king. Subtle indicators that even for someone born into this destiny, the reality of it carries unimaginable weight. Footage of that moment circulated rapidly. Social media platforms lit up with clips, memes, and threads dissecting every frame. "He's grown into the crown," one commentator tweeted. "Diana would be proud," wrote another. Royal fans created side-by-side image collages, one of young William with Diana, another of the man now preparing to be king. But not all reactions were emotional. Some were analytical, even skeptical. Political commentators questioned whether William's calm demeanor would be enough to navigate the turbulence of modern Britain. Public relations experts debated whether his understated approach would resonate in an age of digital noise and celebrity-driven leadership. Still, even many critics acknowledged one thing: William's authenticity could not be denied. In fact, several body language experts went on record in national outlets to describe what they observed. "You can see him grounding himself with small gestures, feet firmly planted, shoulders back, slight nods," one expert noted. "These are nonverbal indicators of confidence. But his eyes, they reveal a man who is already carrying the emotional weight of leadership." Insiders later revealed that William had spent much of the night before the announcement in private reflection. A source close to the family shared that he walked alone in the gardens of Kensington Palace, headphones in, listening to a playlist that reportedly included classical tracks, instrumental scores, and even a few songs his mother used to play. He didn't rehearse a speech. He didn't consult a stylist. He just walked, thought, breathed, centered himself, and by morning he was ready. Even during the impromptu press engagement, William made a point to address the people directly, without the barrier of royal grandeur. He said, "In this moment, I am not just stepping into a role. I am stepping into your lives, your hopes, your future." and I take that with the seriousness it deserves." He didn't linger. He didn't overstay his moment. After only a few minutes, he nodded to the crowd, turned, and disappeared back into the palace. But the echo of his presence remained. Across newsrooms and breakfast tables, conversations erupted. This was not just an inherited title, it was a declaration of a new era. People debated what kind of king he would be. Would he challenge traditions? Would he speak out on social issues more openly? Would he repair the fractured relationship with Prince Harry? Many found themselves asking questions they hadn't considered in years, not because they didn't care about the monarchy, but because for so long it had felt distant, out of touch. But William's brief appearance, with its simplicity and sincerity, had reopened a connection. One particularly touching moment happened off camera, but was later shared by a palace press officer. After his address, as William made his way back inside, a small group of children gathered near the gate shouted, "We love you, William." He paused, turned, and smiled. One little girl held up a homemade sign that read, "Future King." He walked over, crouched to her level, and said, "Thank you. One day, I'll serve you the best I can." It wasn't a PR stunt. No photographers caught the moment. But the palace aide, who watched from afar, said it was the most moving moment of the day. It reminded everyone that William, for all his royal training and media coaching, is still the man who once clutched his mother's hand in crowded rooms, who once tried to build a normal life out of extraordinary circumstances, and who now stands ready to lead not because he must, but because he believes he can do good. As footage of his appearance continues to be analyzed, it's clear that William has chosen a very specific tone for his reign, one of balance. Not flashy, not overly traditional. Not too progressive to alienate royalists, not too reserved to be dismissed by modern Britain. It is a tone that suggests he understands the fine line he must walk. And judging by the way he carried himself in those first few moments, it's a line he's willing and prepared to walk for as long as the nation needs him. The news of King Charles stepping down sent shockwaves not just across the British Isles, but throughout the Commonwealth and beyond. To the public, it was a surprise. To seasoned royal watchers, it was unprecedented. But behind the scenes, the process had been long in motion, marked by subtle shifts, private reckonings, and a deeply personal decision made far from the spotlight of Buckingham Palace. There's an old saying among royal advisors, nothing in the monarchy happens suddenly, only suddenly to the public. That wisdom proved true yet again. Charles's decision to relinquish the throne to his son Prince William was not triggered by a single event. It was a culmination of months, perhaps even years, of introspection, observation, and an honest reckoning with his place in history. And though his reign was one of the shortest in modern history, it may also be remembered as one of the most self-aware. To truly understand why King Charles stepped down, one must first look beyond the pageantry of crowns and palaces and into the private man behind the title. For all the regal stoicism Charles displayed in public, those who knew him intimately describe a man who wrestled with his role, not in terms of desire, but in terms of impact. He had waited decades to become king, longer than any heir in British history. But when the crown was finally placed upon his head, it became clear to him that the world he had prepared for had already changed. Those close to Charles say he was acutely aware of the evolving sentiments toward the monarchy. He read the headlines. He saw the shifting public polls. He noted the growing skepticism among younger generations. And while he remained committed to upholding the institution, he also knew that time was not on his side. Age played a role, undeniably so. At 75, Charles was keenly conscious of the physical and emotional demands of kingship. Though he remained active and appeared in good health, the constant schedule of appearances, state functions, international engagements, and the unrelenting spotlight of monarchy began to weigh heavier with each passing month. He often spoke with confidence about the toll the role had taken on his sleep, his energy, and his ability to connect with the public in the way he once did as Prince of Wales. But the decision wasn't about exhaustion. It was about effectiveness. Charles had long believed in a slimmed-down monarchy, a model that prioritized efficiency, transparency, and public engagement over opulence and outdated ritual. As king, he tried to implement this model, but he quickly found resistance, both from within the institution and from the realities of ceremonial expectation. The institution, steeped in tradition, was slow to change. And Charles, ever the thinker, began to ask the difficult question, am I the right person to lead this transformation? The answer, quietly but firmly, became no. It was not a confession of failure, but a recognition of reality. According to sources within Clarence House, the moment that crystallized this understanding came during a visit to a youth climate summit in Glasgow. Charles had been invited to speak, and though his address was passionate and eloquent, it was William who stole the spotlight. The younger prince spoke directly to the youth in attendance, fielded questions with ease, and connected with the crowd in a way that felt immediate and authentic. After the event, Charles reportedly told a close aide, "This is his century, not mine." Those words, though private, would echo throughout the halls of royal strategy meetings for months to come. Camilla, always the pragmatist, supported his thinking. She, too, had begun to feel the grind of constant royal duty. Though never one to seek the limelight, she had embraced her role as queen consort with grace. But she also understood that the monarchy's survival hinged not on preserving the past, but investing in the future. The conversations that followed were long and often difficult. Charles consulted with religious leaders, constitutional scholars, and senior members of the Privy Council. The legality of a voluntary transition was debated thoroughly. There was no constitutional requirement for a monarch to serve until death. Still, precedent was rare. Many advisors warned of public backlash. Others feared instability or confusion. But Charles was not interested in theatrical exits or grand declarations. He wanted a transition that was smooth, respectful, and dignified. And so, the groundwork was quietly laid. Meetings were held in private residences. Legal teams worked through the details. Advisors coordinated with government officials and royal households. And all the while, Charles continued to appear in public, fulfilling his duties without giving any indication of what was quietly unfolding behind closed doors. One of the more intimate aspects of the decision involved William himself. Sources say Charles sat down with William on at least 3 separate occasions to discuss the potential transition. The conversations were candid, emotional, and deeply personal. Charles wanted to ensure that William felt ready, not just to accept the crown, but to carry its immense responsibility with integrity. William, ever respectful, initially hesitated. He expressed concern about the optics, the pressure, and the speed of such a monumental change. But Charles assured him that this was not a retreat born of weakness. It was a gesture of faith. "I am giving you the future," he reportedly said, "because the future should begin now." There were also logistical considerations. The coronation date had to be chosen with symbolic significance and operational feasibility in mind. Advisors wanted to avoid the colder months, which posed challenges for outdoor processions and public celebrations. Ultimately, a spring date was selected, one that tied into both royal heritage and themes of renewal. Once the date was secured, the rest of the planning accelerated. Wardrobe designers were commissioned. Cathedral choirs began rehearsals. Security protocols were updated. And a team of writers was tasked with crafting William's first official statement as monarch. The entire operation, though immense, was conducted in near total secrecy. When the official announcement was finally made, many were caught off guard. But for those inside the palace, it was simply the final step in a long, thoughtful journey. Still, the question lingers: why now? Why not wait a few more years? Why not ride out the remainder of Charles's reign and allow William more time to prepare? The answer, by most accounts, is rooted in Charles's deep understanding of the moment. He saw the opportunity to hand over the reins while the monarchy still had a chance to reinvent itself from within, rather than being restructured by outside pressure. He also understood something critical, that true leadership sometimes means stepping aside when the time is right, even if it means surrendering a role you've waited your entire life to hold. In doing so, Charles may have offered the monarchy its best chance at survival. By making way for William, he didn't just pass the crown, he passed the torch of relevance, connection, and renewal. And in an era where public trust in institutions is rapidly eroding, that act of humility may prove to be his most lasting legacy. As William steps into the spotlight, he does so with the support of a father who made the hardest decision a king can make, not to rule longer, but to rule wisely. When the coronation date was finally revealed to the public, the air of anticipation that had lingered since King Charles's announcement turned into an electric buzz. For weeks, speculation had swirled across news outlets, royal blogs, and international headlines. Would it be held in the summer to echo Queen Elizabeth II's majestic June coronation? Would it fall on a date steeped in historic royal significance? Or would it take a bold turn toward the modern era with a stripped-back, functional ceremony designed to reflect Prince William's forward-thinking ideals? The answer, when it came, was surprisingly symbolic and deeply intentional. The date selected was May 20th, a moment positioned perfectly between the old and the new. Notably, it aligned with the feast day of St. Dunstan, a medieval monk and archbishop known for reforming the Church of England and modernizing ecclesiastical practices. In royal circles, St. Dunstan's legacy has long been associated with transition and spiritual renewal. While it might seem obscure to most outside of academic or religious circles, its inclusion here was deliberate. The palace, in choosing this date, was signaling a period of meaningful evolution, one where the monarchy, like the Church once did, would re-examine its traditions and reinvest in its future. But beyond the symbolism, the timing was carefully calculated. May 20th gives enough room between the announcement and the coronation for a full-scale operation to be executed flawlessly. From wardrobe and music to transportation, invitations, global coordination, and security arrangements, nothing is ever done last minute in royal operations. And this coronation, while scaled down in certain aspects, is no exception. A high-ranking member of the Lord Chamberlain's office, speaking anonymously, explained that the decision process for the date began months before King Charles made his intentions public. It wasn't simply about logistics, he said. It was about meaning. Every royal event, especially one as historic as a coronation, must reflect the character of the monarch. This wasn't about finding a free weekend on the calendar. This was about legacy. Planning officially began under the codename Operation Dawnlight, a nod to the idea of a new day for the monarchy. As part of this operation, multiple working groups were formed, one for security, one for ceremonial design, one for guest coordination, and one for public engagement. The goal was not just to plan a coronation, but to craft a narrative around it, one that would resonate with the public, the Commonwealth, and the wider world. Insiders say William himself had a surprisingly active role in setting the tone for the event. While he deferred many ceremonial decisions to palace aides and experts in royal tradition, he insisted that the coronation reflect the modern identity of Britain. That meant no golden carriages, no extravagant feasts, and a clear emphasis on inclusion. It also meant that the ceremony would highlight the UK's diversity, with prayers, music, and performances from communities across the kingdom. One particularly touching feature of the coronation plans involves the inclusion of frontline workers. Nurses, teachers, emergency responders, and charity volunteers from all parts of the UK have been invited to witness the event in person. William reportedly pushed for this, insisting that the people who serve the country every day deserve to be honored on the same level as dignitaries and heads of state. It's a clear signal that his reign will value service above spectacle. The coronation itself will be held at Westminster Abbey, as is tradition, a venue that has seen the crowning of English monarchs since the time of William the Conqueror in 1066. The Abbey is more than just a location. It's a symbol of continuity, of sacred duty, and of the British monarchy's deep-rooted connection to history. However, those expecting the grandeur of Elizabeth II's coronation may be surprised. The ceremony, while still regal, is expected to be shorter in duration and simpler in form. It's estimated that the event will last just under 2 hours, compared to Queen Elizabeth's 3-hour service. Some ancient rituals, like the carrying of swords by hereditary nobles or the elaborate homage-paying from peers, may be either shortened or removed entirely. William's view, as described by royal aides, is that meaning should never be buried beneath excess. Still, several key elements will remain untouched. The anointing, considered the most sacred part of the ceremony, will be preserved. In this moment, William will be blessed with holy oil, symbolizing his spiritual duty as sovereign. The crown itself, St. Edward's crown, will also make its traditional appearance. Weighing over 4 pounds and adorned with precious stones, the crown is an unmistakable symbol of monarchical power. Despite its weight, William has reportedly insisted on using it, understanding the power of legacy in an age of change. The coronation invitation list is extensive but selective. Leaders from the 56 nations of the Commonwealth will attend. Heads of state from around the world, presidents, prime ministers, kings, and queens are expected to travel to London. But in a move that has already drawn praise, the number of royal family invitees has been slimmed significantly. Only working royals will take prominent seats. This echoes Charles's vision for a streamlined monarchy and reinforces William's own belief that duty, not title, should determine prominence. Notably absent from the inner circle invitations are Prince Harry and Meghan Markle. Although the Sussexes were informed of the coronation and offered seating within the broader guest list, they will not be part of the ceremonial procession or balcony appearances. This decision, while controversial, is said to be final and has not been reversed even in the face of media scrutiny. Security will be unprecedented. With world leaders in attendance and the global spotlight fixed on London, preparations have been ongoing with British intelligence agencies, Scotland Yard, and even international partners. Thousands of officers will be deployed across London. Surveillance drones will monitor the area, and snipers will be positioned along rooftops. It will be one of the largest coordinated security operations since the 2012 London Olympics. As the date draws closer, businesses and schools across the country prepare for what is expected to be a national holiday. Street parties are being organized. Union Jack flags are being printed en masse. Shops are already offering commemorative plates, mugs, and apparel. And in the halls of Parliament, debates continue about the relevance of monarchy in the modern era. But for now, there's a pause. The coronation has captured attention and imagination. Media coverage is already being planned on a massive scale. Every major British network, BBC, ITV, Channel 4, has special broadcasts in development. American and Australian news organizations are sending anchors and crews. The event will be live-streamed globally, with commentary in dozens of languages. Online platforms like YouTube and TikTok are preparing for record-breaking traffic as viewers around the world tune in for a moment in history. But for all the external noise and logistical buildup, the heart of the coronation lies in something far quieter. It's about a father's belief in his son. It's about a son's readiness to serve. And it's about a nation that, for a moment, gets to come together, not in protest or panic, but in shared tradition. As May 20th approaches, excitement builds, not just for the ceremony, but for what follows. The coronation marks the official beginning of a new reign, but it also represents a turning point for the monarchy. With William on the throne, Britain doesn't just get a new king. It gets a new voice, a new face, and potentially a new identity. And for a country navigating economic uncertainty, political friction, and generational divides, that might be exactly what it needs. When Buckingham Palace officially announced that King Charles had handed the throne to Prince William and revealed the coronation date, the country erupted, but not in a singular wave of applause or uniform celebration. Instead, Britain found itself once again standing on a knife's edge of mixed emotions. In every corner of the kingdom, from the quiet, misty hills of Wales to the bustling inner boroughs of London, the public response was as diverse as the nation itself. Some stood proudly waving the Union Jack, tears in their eyes as they watched history unfold. Others rolled their eyes, turning away from the screens with murmurs about tradition, relevance, and privilege. A generational and ideological divide was instantly visible. At a tea shop in Norfolk, a group of pensioners gathered around a portable radio like it was the 1950s. There, amidst the clinking of porcelain cups and the quiet hum of conversation, the moment was met with a reverent silence. One elderly woman, Joan, leaned forward and whispered, "I remember when they crowned Elizabeth. And now, William, that boy has grown into a man we can believe in." Down in central London, crowds gathered outside Buckingham Palace not with protest signs, but with balloons, floral arrangements, and homemade placards reading, "Long live the King and welcome William." The air was festive. Children wore plastic crowns. Older generations brought folding chairs and recounted tales of previous royal events. It felt, for them, like a new chapter worth celebrating. But drive 200 miles north into the streets of Manchester, and you'd hear a different tone. At a university cafe, students debated the necessity of a monarchy in 2025. "We're in a cost-of-living crisis," one said bluntly. "What relevance does a crown have in a world where people can't pay their heating bills?" Others nodded, sharing their skepticism, not necessarily about William as a person, but about the institutio. That same skepticism echoed online, where Twitter, TikTok, and YouTube erupted into a firestorm of opinions. Hashtags like #KingWilliam, #MonarchyShift, and #ModernThrone trended within minutes. But so did #NotMyKing and #AbolishTheMonarchy. The divide was unmistakable and increasingly generational. According to polling data released by the Royal Trust Foundation just one day after the coronation announcement, 73% of Britons aged 55 and older expressed support for the transition and said they believed Prince William was well-suited to lead the monarchy into the modern era. Among those aged 18 to 30, support dropped to just 41%, with 36% saying the monarchy should be phased out entirely. One young woman interviewed in Brighton said, "Look, William seems decent, I'll give him that. But the problem isn't who wears the crown, it's that the crown still exists." This conflict wasn't limited to public sentiment. Within Parliament, political voices offered their takes as well. Prime Minister Emma Langford, speaking during a press conference, expressed her full support. Prince William embodies the strength, compassion, and clarity of leadership this nation deserves. His coronation will not only honor tradition, but inspire a renewed sense of unity. However, members of the Republic movement, including MP David Crandall, issued statements pushing back. We must acknowledge that this transition, while peaceful, highlights the absurdity of hereditary leadership in a modern democracy. It's time to have a national conversation, not about the coronation, but about the future of the monarchy altogether. In Scotland, where discussions of independence have gained momentum in recent years, reactions were especially nuanced. First Minister Fiona McLaren addressed the nation, saying, "Scotland recognizes the symbolism of this moment. But our allegiance must always be to the people, not to titles passed by birth. We welcome dialogue about a more democratic structure moving forward." And yet, despite the critiques, the emotional power of the moment could not be denied. For many citizens, the ascension of Prince William marked not just a ceremonial shift, but a chance to breathe new life into a fractured national identity. With the loss of Queen Elizabeth still fresh in the collective memory, and Charles's reign feeling brief and transitional, William represented something stable, grounded, familiar. This emotional connection, particularly among those who followed the lives of Diana's sons from their earliest years, ran deep. Outside Kensington Palace, one woman named Margaret held a photograph of Princess Diana and quietly told a nearby reporter, "She raised him right. And now she'll watch over him as he takes her dream further than she ever could." The emotional narrative stretched beyond the UK, too. Across the Commonwealth, reactions were equally varied. In Australia, Prime Minister Anthony Fairchild offered warm congratulations but reminded citizens of the upcoming referendum on becoming a republic. This is a moment for reflection. We admire the dignity of Prince William, but we must also consider our own national identity. In Canada, Governor-General Simone Rousseau delivered an address reaffirming the country's constitutional ties to the monarchy, calling William's leadership a bridge between heritage and hope. In Jamaica, however, activists reignited calls for full independence from the British Crown. "The new king is not our king," red signs held during a peaceful demonstration in Kingston. "We are ready for self-rule, and now is the time." Despite this global tension, there were unexpected moments of celebration in far-off places. A royal society in New Zealand held a lantern parade. In Mumbai, British expats hosted viewing parties. In Dubai, prominent buildings lit up with Union Jack colors and a gesture of goodwill. Back in the UK, perhaps the most telling sign of public mood came not from polling or political statements, but from art. Street artists in Bristol unveiled a massive mural of Prince William, depicted not in robes or crowns, but in a hoodie and jeans, walking hand in hand with a young child. The caption read, "Not just a king, a father, a man, our future." It went viral overnight. Public schools announced themed history weeks around the coronation. Libraries extended opening hours for displays on royal lineage. And neighborhood councils began issuing event permits for street parties, parades, and neighborhood tea gatherings. Still, not all was harmonious. Vandalism was reported in Liverpool, where an anti-monarchy graffiti tag was spray-painted across a public building the same day the coronation plans were released. It read simply, "Bread over crowns." The duality of the public's reaction speaks volumes. This coronation, unlike those before it, is unfolding not in a vacuum of royal awe, but in a society more fragmented and aware than ever. People see behind the curtain. They weigh the cost. They question tradition. But for all the doubt, there's also a flicker of hope, a cautious willingness to believe that William might bring substance to the symbolism. A royal historian, Dr. Lillian Huxley, put it best in a BBC interview. "This is the first coronation truly shaped by the digital age. Every moment will be scrutinized, streamed, and debated in real time. But therein lies the opportunity. Never has a monarch had such a chance to reintroduce the crown to the people on their terms." And so, the country watches, breathes, and debates. It gathers in living rooms and town halls. It argues online and claps in the streets. It celebrates and it resists. But most importantly, it pays attention. Because whether met with jubilation or division, the coronation of Prince William is not just a royal affair. It's a national mirror, reflecting hopes, doubts, dreams, and disappointments. And the reflection, though fractured, is undeniably real. As news of Prince William's impending coronation made its way across the globe, one of the first questions whispered in every corner of the internet, in every newsroom and dinner table conversation was not about regalia or guest lists. It was about the absent duo. What would Prince Harry and Meghan Markle do now? Though not mentioned in the official palace statement, their absence spoke volumes. The Duke and Duchess of Sussex were once central figures in the royal firmament, promising a modern and more relatable face to the crown. But as William steps forward into his destiny as king, the question of where Harry and Meghan fit, or whether they fit at all, becomes more pressing than ever. According to sources close to the palace, the royal family did extend a formal invitation to Harry and Meghan, though not for central ceremonial participation. They were invited to attend the coronation in a limited capacity, no balcony appearance, no involvement in processions, and no direct presence in William's inner circle. In short, they were welcome to attend, but not to be seen as part of the institution's future. This decision, insiders say, was deliberate. It reflected months of strained communication and a deep undercurrent of unresolved issues stemming from years of public statements, interviews, memoirs, and legal actions that had strained the family's core relationships. The palace wanted to avoid controversy overshadowing the coronation, including the Sussexes too prominently risked pulling attention away from William's new role. Excluding them entirely risked accusations of vindictiveness. This middle ground, invite but do not involve, was seen as the least disruptive option. And yet, for Harry, this may have felt like a fresh wound over an old scar. Sources close to the Sussexes say Harry was deeply conflicted upon hearing of his brother's ascension. On one hand, he reportedly expressed private pride in William's readiness and strength. On the other, he felt a renewed sting of separation. In Montecito, where Harry and Meghan have tried to forge a life outside of the royal bubble, the news of the coronation sparked both reflection and, inevitably, decisions. Their official spokesperson released a brief, carefully worded statement just hours after the coronation date was announced. The Duke and Duchess of Sussex congratulate Prince William on this important moment in his journey of service. They wish him and the royal family peace, unity, and success in the days ahead. It was polite, it was supportive, and it was cold. Notably missing were any indications of their own attendance. In fact, multiple reports from within their circle suggest that the Sussexes have no plans to attend the coronation. A source close to Meghan said she believes their presence would be a distraction. The story should be about William, not about past drama. But many royal analysts believe there's more beneath the surface. Harry's relationship with his family has been damaged by more than just physical distance. The release of his memoir, public interviews, and ongoing legal entanglements have made reconciliation difficult. In Spare, he painted vivid and often painful images of his childhood, his emotional wounds, and his complicated relationship with his father and brother. The book strained an already fractured bond. According to royal historian Geoffrey Fielding, William's coronation may well be the moment that finalizes the divide. Symbolically, the line between heir and spare has never been wider. This sentiment is shared by royal insiders who say that palace aides have not encouraged outreach between William and Harry since the announcement. There's a desire to keep the focus clean, uncontroversial. The coronation is not a family reunion. It's a constitutional event. And yet, for all the strategic distance, the emotional undertones are hard to ignore. Sources say that William himself remains conflicted. While he reportedly did not lobby for Harry's inclusion in the ceremony, he also did not object to his attendance. But what troubles him, according to those familiar with the situation, is the possibility that the public sees his brother as exiled rather than estranged. The difference, for William, matters. Still, no phone calls have been made. No olive branches offered. At least, none that have been confirmed. Meghan, for her part, has remained almost entirely silent. Her public appearances have continued, charity events, business engagements, and quiet time with their children in California, but she has offered no direct commentary about the coronation. Those close to her say she sees this moment as a turning point, not just for the monarchy, but for their own path. They're done waiting for approval, said a friend of the couple. They're building something new. Their lives aren't defined by what happens at Westminster Abbey. In the days following the announcement, speculation mounted about a potential media move. Several outlets reported that the Sussexes were considering a sit-down interview to offer their perspective on the coronation. Others claimed that Netflix executives were exploring documentary extensions related to the royal transition. No confirmations were made, but the idea of a counter-narrative brewing overseas sent palace aides into high alert. For the royal family, managing the public perception of unity has become a delicate act. They want to honor tradition, support William, and project stability. But they also know the power Harry and Meghan wield in shaping global conversation. Even a subtle comment from California can shift headlines, influence opinions, and dominate discourse. And it's not just the press that's watching. Public reaction to the Sussexes' absence is mixed. On one side, there's sympathy, particularly from younger generations and fans of Meghan, who view their exclusion as further evidence of royal coldness. On the other side, there's criticism, with many suggesting that if Harry truly cared about his brother or the crown, he would attend regardless of past pain. A viral post on X, formerly Twitter, summed it up sharply: history is being made. You show up. Family, duty, country, that's what they signed up for. But perhaps that's the real crux of it. Harry and Meghan believe they signed long ago. They no longer see themselves as part of the machinery of monarchy. They see themselves as individuals charting their own path, one that exists outside the gilded walls and public obligations. And as William prepares to walk into a 1,000-year-old institution, Harry prepares to stay exactly where he is, geographically distant, emotionally entangled, and spiritually removed from the family business. Still, some wonder if the story is truly over. There are whispers, ever so faint, that the door isn't completely closed. That one day, a reconciliation might happen, not under the world's watchful gaze, but quietly, behind closed doors. Perhaps not this year. Perhaps not for many. But the bond of brothers, though battered, is not yet broken beyond repair. Until then, William will become king without Harry by his side, and Harry will watch it unfold from a continent away. As the crown is placed on his brother's head, he may remember their childhood, running through palace halls, riding bicycles at Balmoral, whispering secrets behind thick curtains of royal velvet. Those memories, however distant, will echo, and in that silence, perhaps, there will still be love, even if it's no longer spoken.